Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senior Vice President for Amazon Web Services, Andy Jassy.
Thank you, and welcome to the AWS Summit here in San Francisco. It is great to be here. It has been a little bit over a year since the last time I was on this stage and the last time we did the summit here, and it's just fantastic to be back with you. We have close to 10,000 people who registered for the day today, and another 7,000 who are registered on the live stream. So we have a bunch of our friends here today, and a lot is going on in the business, so I'm going to get right to it. So I thought I'd start by giving you an idea of how the AWS business is progressing. And the short answer here is that we're growing really, really fast. And I'll give you a few data points. Our storage service, which is Amazon S3, if you look at the amount of data transferred, which is a pretty good measure because it captures both the number of objects and then the amount of activity to and from the service, you can see if you compare Q4 2014 over Q4 2013, the service is growing 102% year over year. And the same is true in the EC2 space, which is our compute service, where if you look at the number of hours run year over year, Q4 14 over Q4 13, it's grown 93% year over year. Those are very large growth rates on a very large base. You're also seeing the number of customers use AWS continue to expand. We have over 1 million active customers. And the way that we define an active customer is somebody who's not affiliated with Amazon in any way, who's using the platform over the last 30 days. And so we have over 1 million active customers, and it's a very diverse customer base that ranges from some of the most successful startups like Pinterest and Airbnb and Dropbox and Dropcam and Domo, to large enterprises all over the world in every imaginable vertical segment. So in oil and gas, it's Shell, BP, Hess. In healthcare, it's Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and Merck, Bristol-Myers Squibb. In financial services, FINRA, and Intuit, and the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and Suncorp. In manufacturing, GE, and Philips, and Schneider Electric. In technology, Netflix, and Samsung, and Adobe. In media, Condé Nast, and Time, and News Corp, the Washington Post, the New York Times. Very broad global enterprise customer base in every imaginable vertical segment. And we've also built a large public sector business where we have, at this point, over 1,500 government agencies worldwide using AWS and over 3,600 academic institutions, so a very broad customer base. From the very start of AWS, we always knew that having a very large, vibrant ecosystem of partners was going to be really important to our customers and really strategic to the AWS business. And that has been the case and will continue to be the case. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Most large companies want help from systems integrators or technology consulting partners to figure out how to move to the cloud in the optimal way. And then customers want to run the same software from ISVs they've been running, but they just want to run it on top of AWS's technology infrastructure platform. And so you'll see that in our ecosystem, which is really the largest by a pretty wide margin. We have thousands of systems integrators who've built practices on top of AWS, and they range from some of the large global SIs like Accenture and Cognizant and Booz Allen to regional SIs who've really pivoted their businesses around AWS like Slalom and DataPipe, Smartronix, LogicWorks, to born-in-the-cloud SIs who've done a remarkable amount of the heavy lifting for enterprises early on. And these are SIs like CloudReach and SecondWatch and Cloud Nexa. Thousands have built practices on top of AWS. Same thing you see in the ISV ecosystem where, again, you have thousands of companies who've made their software work on top of the AWS technology infrastructure platform. These are companies like Infor and Splunk and Informatica and Esri and Autodesk. And then you also have born-in-the-cloud SaaS providers like Acquia, which is just on fire in the CMS space, that have built all in from the start on top of the cloud and on top of AWS. So a very broad ecosystem. this is the most recent Magic Quadrant for infrastructure as a service from Gartner. And you can see that AWS is located in that top right Magic Quadrant, and the rest of the 14 providers are clustered more toward the middle. So it's a pretty significant leadership position that's continuing to accelerate. This is an analysis that we did that we thought was kind of interesting. And what we did was we looked at all of the multi-billion-dollar enterprise technology companies in the world and looked at their relative year-over-year growth rate for revenue. And you can see there's a pretty wide divergence. You can see some companies are shrinking. IBM is shrinking in double digits right now, as an example. There are a bunch of others who are growing in single digits, a handful in the low double digits. But you can see with AWS at over 40% year-over-year revenue growth, it's the fastest growing multi-billion-dollar enterprise IT company in the world. And one of the major reasons for that is over the last couple years, the cloud has really become the new normal. Companies of all sizes are deploying their applications to AWS and the cloud infrastructure by default. You see new companies building businesses from scratch on top of the cloud, existing companies building brand new applications from scratch on top of the cloud, and enterprises moving as fast as they can to migrate existing applications to the cloud. This used to be a novel concept a few years ago that companies were thinking about running most of their applications in the cloud. Not so much today. It's become the new normal, and it's become the default. So if there's this new normal that I'm talking about that exists, what are some of the patterns of this new normal? And I'm going to give you 8 today that we see. And the first is that startups will build businesses from scratch on top of the cloud. And if you think about it, this is kind of a no-brainer. As a startup, you don't have any legacy. You don't have any dependencies. It's lower cost, and you don't have to waste your capital on building the infrastructure, especially before you realize you have a good idea or not. And it allows you to move much more quickly. And for startups who have great ideas, who are looking to disrupt industries, you know that moving fast is a big deal. And it's why you've seen over the last few years a number of startups completely disrupt industries that didn't have a lot of change, or companies that felt like they were the incumbents and they were going to be the leaders for a long period of time. If you just look at what Airbnb has done in the hotel space, look at what Dropbox has done in the consumer storage space, look at Supercell. They've built a billion-dollar gaming business out of nowhere. Look at what Instacart has done in the grocery delivery space, or what Tinder has done in the matchmaking and dating space. These were companies that started from a standing start, and they built their businesses fast on top of AWS, and they have completely disrupted existing industries that most people didn't think were going to be disrupted anytime soon. Another one of those examples is Vessel. This is one of those examples that's early on in the making. So Vessel has been started and is being run by the same team that built and successfully managed the Hulu business. And what they're doing is they're building a subscription service that provides people early access to the online video they love. It's a very interesting and potentially disruptive idea in the online video space. And it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage to tell you more about it the founder and CEO of Vessel, Jason Kyler.
Thank you very much, Andy, and to the AWS team. My name is Jason Kyler. It is great to be here. This is our hometown. It was very easy. We operate about 5 blocks from here. So Andy mentioned a little bit about Vessel. I'll tell you just a tiny bit more. We provide early access to the video and creators that people adore. Whether it's Blake Shelton's latest music video or the latest antics from Ellen DeGeneres on her TV show and everything in between, that's what Vessel is. Little trivia, I spent 9 years working at Amazon.com back in the day from 1997 to 2006. So I got to build alongside Andy for many, many years. Great time. And then after that, I was the founding CEO of Hulu. And I wanted to sort of share with you what the early days of Hulu were all about. So this is a picture of a data center. Let's go back to the summer of 2007. Some of the first things we did, the decisions that we made when we were building Hulu, was to spend millions of dollars and thousands of people hours in data centers. So we had a data center in Los Angeles. We spun one up in Virginia. We bought a lot of hardware. We configured that hardware. We racked that hardware. We had to replace it when it wasn't working. This was a lot of time and energy, and it was necessary in the summer of 2007. But unfortunately, it wasn't a difference maker. And so I'm going to come back to that here in just a couple of minutes. So let's fast forward now 6 years later and talk about what happened in the beginning with Vessel. So if we could turn the slides here to get to the next slide. Apparently, there must be a slide problem. There we go. So in the summer of 2013, Rich Tom, who was the CTO of Hulu, and myself, we created Vessel. And these were the humble beginnings of Vessel. This was our first office. This was the global headquarters. There were 2 desks. Rich would sit on the left-hand desk. I'd sit on the right-hand desk. Sometimes we'd have meetings in the middle at that little conference table in the middle of the room. And we thought about big, gnarly problems that we wanted to solve. And the key here, and just like with any startup, is you want to spend as much a percentage of your time and energy trying to do the things that you're uniquely skilled at and you have an edge. So we were very fortunate in the summer of 2013, which was very different in the summer of 2007, where we were able to spend almost all of our time focused on things around video and the things that we had experience doing and the things that we thought we had an edge on others to go and create. So we spent a lot of time at that whiteboard. We spent a lot of time with Post-it notes on the side. And we had these ambitions to create something very, very special called Vessel. And it required a lot of different things. So we had to make sure that we could take payments on a global basis. We had to make sure that we could store a lot of video from premium content creators, ultimately tens and thousands of them. We also had to make sure that we had websites that worked for both creators and consumers alike. And this service had to work on all devices, which is a tremendous amount of technical complexity. And then ultimately, it was global as well. So a lot of big ambitions for a very, very small, humble team. So the big question was, how are we going to go off and do this? Were we going to do what we did in 2007, where we start to spend millions of dollars and thousands of person hours on data centers? Well, for us, it was an incredibly easy decision, which was we leveraged Amazon Web Services from the very start. Now, keep in mind that the founding team of Vessel largely came from Hulu. So our background was not in Amazon Web Services. We very much were the data center version of building a new company. And so we were relative newbies. So we started pretty humbly and modestly, where there were 4 core services, 4 primitives from AWS that we leveraged. They're the ones that you see on the screen behind me. And we were so excited, the dev team was so excited by their experience with these 4 core services that we quickly grew to leverage 11 of Amazon's core services. If Rich Tom, our CTO and co-founder, were on the stage here with me, he would describe this as a dream come true in terms of DevOps in the cloud. And please know that there's actually a number of services that we intend to use in the next several months as well. Now, the other thing that Rich and the team would say if they were on the stage as well, which is the services are amazing, and you all know that in this crowd. They're performant, they're well-documented APIs. The Amazon team clearly knows what they're doing, and they do this at scale. However, half the value that we get from working with Amazon Web Services goes to the community. So the fact that all of you and people around the globe have been using these services and many more and run into so many issues that we have yet to run into, it accelerates our ability to move fast and to build services that matter in this world. So it's that community that really is half the value. We learn from you, and hopefully over time you'll learn a little bit from us too. So that's a big part of our decision to use AWS. Now, if we could go to the next slide, the relationship is pretty simple here. On the left-hand side, what Vessel does is the things that we're uniquely skilled at. We're leveraging our experience from Amazon, our experience from Hulu, obviously the growing team at Vessel. This is what we do best. And then what Amazon does on the other side are the things that they do best. These core building blocks, these services that are very foundational, and we're very, very thankful for them. It's very fair to say that there's a whole lot of love in both directions between us to Amazon Web Services and back as well. So I want to share with you one very important case study before I wrap up. And this is very timely. This happened literally over the last 16 days. It's that timely. So I'm going to play a short little video here for you, and it's all about our launch. So 16 days ago at 12:01 a.m., we launched globally. And we had a lot of things lined up for this launch. There was about 175 different creators that had in total about 200 million rabid fans that followed their every move. And these creators, in many cases, were teed up to go and share the good news that they were going to be on Vessel and that you could get their content early. So a lot of them created videos. A lot of them were ready with tweets and Facebook posts and whatnot. And just keep in mind, all of this stuff was happening at exactly the same time at 12:01 a.m. 16 days ago. So here's just 30 seconds of one video.
We signed up with Vessel, a brand new platform for everyone who wants to see things before anyone else. You can see a brand new episode of The Crack right now on Vessel.
Oh, wow. I don't know what to expect anymore.
All of your favorite shows, The Crack, Villager TV, and Egg's Guide to Minecraft will be available on Vessel first. Well, what are you waiting for?
So what Element Animation did here, and they're one of 175 different folks, again, collectively, that have about 200 million rabid fans, is they were releasing this content at 12:01 a.m. 16 days ago, from Blake Shelton to everybody else, and all happening at once, and all sending people to Vessel at that moment in time to get a free year. So this was a time-sensitive thing, a big, huge rush of people onto our servers at the exact same time. So in many cases, this would be a holy crap moment. This is the kind of thing that can kill a service before it even gets started. And I will tell you that in 2007, this is how we would feel with that kind of a thing happening. We would never have the ambition to pull off what we did 16 days ago. But because Amazon Web Services had our back, it was not an OMG moment or an OM asterisk G moment. It was not that at all. It was a walk on the beach, and we felt incredibly safe and secure knowing that Amazon had our back. So I'm very, very thankful, literally 16 days into it, knowing that Ellen DeGeneres is talking about Vessel, and Blake Shelton is talking about Vessel, and everybody in between is talking about Vessel. I couldn't be happier that we get to work with this great team and this great company. And I want to say thank you to Andy and the whole AWS team for having us here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. Super cool. Really, really interesting what that team is building. And anybody that knows anything about Jason and the team that he's brought with him from Hulu that's building Vessel would not bet against this company disrupting the online video space. Very exciting. So we talked a little bit about how startups are going to build from scratch on top of the cloud. That was kind of the first pattern of the new normal. The second pattern is that speed actually matters for big companies too. Companies of all sizes are going to use the cloud to move faster than they ever have before. And we get asked still a fair bit, less so than before, but still a fair bit, what our answer is to naysayers of the cloud. And my answer is that those remaining naysayers better get their heads out of the sand before they're staring at the taillights of their competitors. It is impossible as a big company in this day and age to be able to be competitive if you can't move fast. And if you don't use the cloud, it's impossible to move as fast as you're going to need to, especially because all of your competitors are using the cloud. For years and years and years, enterprises have had these on-premise data centers that typically had limited functionality. They were expensive. You had to pay a big fixed cost up front. They didn't iterate very quickly. And they were a little bit like an ice cube frozen in time. And increasingly, over the last number of years, they've had to think about, do I want that, or do I want the much broader functionality you get in something like AWS or in the cloud, and that's iterating at a much faster rate. So for perspective, in 2012, AWS delivered what we considered 159 significant services and features. In 2013, that number was 280. Last year in 2014, that number was 516. So lots of functionality, and we're iterating at an increasing pace. And so what it means is it means that enterprises have to think about which they prefer. Do they want their older on-premises setup, which has, it's expensive, big fixed costs, doesn't have a ton of functionality, tends to move rather slow, or do they want the cloud in AWS, which is a lower variable cost, you only pay for what you consume, it has a lot more functionality, and it's iterating more quickly. And when you think about it, it's not that much of a choice. And it's why you see so many big companies and enterprises who are doing all kinds of things on AWS in the cloud, all kinds of digital transformation, all kinds of innovation with altogether new apps. And I'll give you a few examples here on both the digital transformation and the altogether new apps side. So if you look at examples of digital transformation, Unilever had this issue where they wanted to launch lots and lots of websites, and it was slow for them to do so. So they wanted to build a standardized platform to make that faster. So they built a standardized marketing platform on top of AWS. They migrated 500 applications in a few months to it. They now have over 1,700 of those websites that they've migrated to AWS, and it's 75% faster to deploy on AWS than it was before when they were doing it on premises. Or take Mint.com, which is part of Intuit now. It's a free service. 15 million users use it to store their bank and credit card and loan and investment information and access it through a single interface. They have moved Mint.com to run 100% in production on top of AWS. They use over 700 EC2 instances and over 1,000 EBS volumes, plus a whole bunch of other AWS services, load balancing and DNS and monitoring and auto-scaling and CloudTrail, which is our API auditing service, a vast array of services that make it much easier for them not only to move their application, but to then iterate faster. So those are a couple examples of digital transformation. Lots of companies doing this. You also see a whole bunch of innovation happening at existing companies on top of AWS. So, for example, take the Singapore Post, which is the leading mail carrier in Singapore and Asia Pacific. It's an entity that's been around for a long time. They were looking to try to figure out how to diversify and build other businesses. And so they built an e-commerce business from scratch in 3 months, entirely on top of AWS. And after just a few years, it's already 27% of the total revenue of that entity. Think about how long-standing they were, and to be able to launch a new business in a few months and have it be over a quarter of your revenue, it's pretty remarkable. And they did it at 50% less cost than it would have cost them if they had tried to do it on premises. Or take Major League Baseball. So Major League Baseball has a feature they built called StatCast. And it's designed to allow fans, to, when they're watching the games, to be able to look at different scenarios and ask the canonical question of what if? What if this had happened? And what they do is they have missile radar technology set up all over the field to track all the movements of the players and the umpires and the ball. In fact, they track the location of the ball 2,000 times per second. And they stream all that data back through Amazon Kinesis, which is our platform for processing real-time streaming data, store it in S3, our storage service, and then do real-time analytics via EC2 on 17 petabytes of data per game, per day. And then they feed that information back to StatCast in near real time for viewers. So let me give you an example of this in action. Many of you may remember Game 7 of the World Series last year, where the San Francisco Giants defeated the Kansas City Royals in the epic 7th game. And one of the key plays in that game was this hard ground ball that Eric Hosmer hit into the hole in second, between second and short. Joe Panik dived for it, stabbed it, threw to first. They initially ruled him safe. They went to replay. They ruled him out. Well, what StatCast was able to show was that he was out by 0.2 seconds. But if he had not slid into first base, he would have been safe by a foot. that completely changes the viewer experience. It also proves, of course, the old adage that you never slide into first base. And so think about how that changes the viewer experience when you're watching a game at a key moment. And so they're completely reinventing their customer experience on top of the cloud. Another example of that is Nike. Nike is building all kinds of new applications on top of the AWS cloud. And for us, it's such a privilege to work with a company like Nike because they're one of the most creative consumer brands in the world and have been for a long time. And so to tell you a little bit more about how they're using the AWS platform, it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage Wilf Russell, the VP of Development from Nike's Consumer Digital Technology team.
Well, it's great to be here today. My name is Wilf Russell, and I run the development organization for the Consumer Digital Technology team at Nike. I'm super happy to be on stage today to talk about how our relationship with AWS is helping us grow our technical footprint and capabilities. Nike is a global company with a very strong mission. Our mission is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. The Consumer Digital Technology Group is responsible for all applications and services that touch our consumers on a day-to-day basis. That includes brick-and-mortar retail, digital e-commerce, and our mobile applications. And of course, our mission and vision is aligned with Nike and our digital business partners. We connect to our consumers across three major portfolios. Our Nike Plus is our suite of mobile applications. This includes the running app, Fuel Band, Nike Training Club, NG360, football, and skate. Recently, only 2 months ago, we launched a new application into our constellation of apps, the Sneakers app, which is being very well received into the market today. All of these are powered by a suite of back-end services that include things like activity, fuel, leaderboards, social activity, and friends. Our direct-to-consumer business, that includes our digital store at Nike.com as well as our brick-and-mortar retail locations. We have over 800 retail stores worldwide, and we have a digital presence in over 45 countries, and we're growing. For our brand portfolio, we create more than 250 digital experiences each and every year. These include local running clubs, marathons, and also much larger venues, such as the World Cup and the Olympics. One of the things that we're doing in consumer digital is really trying to grow our technical footprint and transition into becoming much more of a technical organization. And we are looking at ways to up our game across the board. We are moving from vendor-driven technology solutions to much bigger embracement of both open source technology and cloud infrastructure. We're also starting to adopt open source and also contribute back to the open source community. This is something that's completely new for Nike. Of course, AWS's rich set of tools and flexible services and platforms help to drive that evolution. We need to move to development models that decrease our inception to delivery timeframes. As such, we're really adopting a lot more agile methodologies. The other great benefit that AWS provides is the ability to spin up very quickly prototypes and proof of concepts that help to drive and foster our innovation. We are also starting to create a platform of services that help to unlock experiences across all of our portfolios. Having a broad set of APIs, of course, means that we need to be able to have a very strong security and privacy posture and to protect our consumers' data at all times. Recently, Forrester named AWS as the only provider in the leader category for public cloud security. AWS's elastic storage capacity and compute power allows us to co-locate and correlate all of our analytics and BI information. This is really important as we're able to glean insights from this information that's going to enable real-time personalization and customized user journeys to better serve our consumers. We have made a very specific decision at Nike to re-architect our applications and services to take advantage of the AWS globally distributed infrastructure and their sets of services. In doing so, we've actually coined a new phrase to describe some of our core design tenets. We call them the indifferences. This might sound a little unusual, but these provide us structure to help us with some of our underlying design challenges. We have disaster indifference. We believe that disasters, both large and small, should not disrupt our business. Even something as catastrophic as losing our stack in a region, the overall architecture needs to be able to manage and support uninterrupted operations. This is obviously part of an overall DR strategy. How do we do this? Well, we make sure that we use highly replicated data architectures that cross not just the multi-AZs, but also are in multi-regions. We create fault-tolerant designs that expect failure, that are able to recover from failure and unplanned maintenance. AWS's multi-AZ and multi-region capabilities help to drive this core tenet. We also need to be able to scale our digital interactions without a trade-off in performance. One example that we have is we have a very large sneakerhead community that loves to watch for our product launches and grab some of our most coveted sneakers. That will actually drive, at times, several orders of magnitude greater traffic to our site in a very short period of time. We need to be able to flex to that scale without paying for fixed peak capacities. How are we doing this? Decoupled services that can scale independently based on load, using NoSQL storage to expand, be able to expand without downtime, and of course is AWS's auto-scaling and on-demand infrastructure with things like auto-scale groups, CloudWatch, and a rich set of APIs allows us to automate, control, and manage our environments. Lastly, change indifference. We need to be able to change anything, anytime without impact to the consumer. Configuration updates, new feature deployments, ongoing maintenance. How are we doing this? Well, we're making sure that we're building decoupled architectures with a strong API layer that can morph and grow and change over time. We're using continuous delivery models, blue-green deploys, and we're building a strong DevOps culture to enable us to get to zero downtime updates. AWS's on-demand infrastructure allows us the flexibility so that we actually don't have to plan for infrastructure months in advance like we used to previously. We know that they're there so that we can spin up new environments and roll new features when we need to. Right now, we are operating over 70 services and applications in AWS today. Most of those were built just last year, and we're growing. We continue to evolve our applications using modern development methodologies, cloud-native architectural blueprints we're creating that really help to ensure that we have foundational elements common across our services, things like logging, monitoring, service discovery, et cetera. AWS's growing array of platforms and services will continue to help us accelerate our development. We are very excited and very happy to have made AWS our chosen cloud provider, and we're looking forward to an even stronger relationship in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Will. Super cool what Nike's doing, and it's really an honor to work with a company that creative and that clever. So the third macro pattern of the new normal is that customers want access to the whole enchilada. And when you talk to enterprises and to companies, what they'll tell you is having lower costs is attractive. And it's also often a conversation starter. But what they'll also tell you is the largest reason that they're moving to the cloud so quickly, by far, is the increased agility and speed that it gives them. And if you think about how you move faster, it's a couple big components. The first is being able to provision hundreds or thousands of servers in minutes, as opposed to having to wait 10 to 18 weeks for just one server, like was the old model. that helps you move much more quickly. It also encourages people inside your company to think about new ideas because they know they actually have a chance of trying it and running an experiment if they have a good idea. But the other really big piece in being able to move quickly is having a very robust, very fully featured technology infrastructure platform at your fingertips, so you don't have to spend all the time reinventing those infrastructure components, and you get to spend all your time on what's innovative and different about your idea and application. And if you look at the AWS technology infrastructure platform, it has many more services and many more features within those services than any other technology provider by a large amount. And so you can see at the infrastructure layer, we have 11 regions all over the world with a 12th on the way. We have 28 availability zones. We have 52 points of presence for our content distribution network. Then we have a number of core services and building blocks for you to stitch together however you see fit. So we have compute with a bunch of features around compute. We have multiple storage options. We have object storage and block storage and archival and backup storage. We have a relational database offering that comes in many flavors. We have a NoSQL database offering. We have a caching service. We have a content distribution network and a bunch of networking features and capabilities that allow you to protect your usage the way you want on top of these building blocks. And then we have a number of administration and security capabilities that range from broad identity functionality to fine-grained access control to monitoring to the ability to track all of your API calls, who made them, what they tried to change, whether they changed them at all, to configuration management, where you can tell all of your resources in AWS, all of their dependencies, and any changes to their configurations. We have a number of analytics capabilities. We have a big batch computing service that's a Hadoop service. We have a platform, as I mentioned earlier, that Major League Baseball is using for processing real-time streaming data called Kinesis. We have a data warehouse service. We have a number of application services that automate a lot of the types of software capabilities you have to typically build yourself, queuing and notifications and email and search and transcoding and workflow. We have a number of mobile capabilities for our mobile developers that range from identity and sync to mobile push. We're sending billions and billions of mobile push messages a week now for customers, to analytics. And then we have a number of deployment and developer tools that range not only from being able to deploy through co-deploy or build an integration and a source code repository, but also a bunch of different abstractions on how to use the platform, ranging from a web GUI that's the AWS Management Console, to repeatable templates and CloudFormation, to a DevOps tool that does a lot of automation and orchestration for you in OpsWorks, to a container and Elastic Beanstalk. And then we've built over the last couple of years a layer on top of that that are really enterprise solutions. So we have a virtual desktop in the cloud service called Workspaces. We have enterprise storage and collaboration called WorkDocs. And we have a secure corporate email service called WorkMail. And then a marketplace that we launched a couple years ago that's really been on fire and continues to grow. It's got 23 different categories in there. It has over 2,000 products, and it enables you in one click to provision the software that you want to run on top of AWS, which is very handy for customers. And then we have a number of people services that you have told us matter to you over the last number of years, ranging from account management to support, where you have a one-to-one technical account management relationship with somebody at AWS that knows your environment well, to professional services, to training, and then certification of your people to show that they've actually learned how to use the platform and know they have a certain competence level where you can be confident that they're operating it. Very broad set of functionality and technology infrastructure platform. But while we have a lot more services than any other technology provider, it's not just the number of services. It also has to do with how many features you have within those services, where we have a very expansive set of those within those services that let you do more. So let me give you a few examples. If you look at compute, we have a general purpose instance family that has a commensurate amount of CPU and memory. We have a compute-optimized instance family, a memory-optimized instance family, a storage-optimized instance family, an I/O-optimized instance family, a GPU-optimized instance family, and an inexpensive burstable instance family called the T2s. No other provider even has half of those. Or look inside storage. If you look at block storage with our Elastic Block Store, EBS, we have 3 different volume types. We launched with magnetic, and then for customers that had very demanding throughput applications, we built provisioned IOPS so they could tell us exactly how many IOPS they need, and we deliver that to them. And then we launched a new general purpose SSD-based volume type that customers have been using really as the default. So again, 3 volume types, nobody has more than 1. If you look at object storage, so we have S3, and it's really not just about being able to store objects durably at high availability, which, by the way, is no easy trick. It takes a lot of work at scale. But it's also about the functionality and capability you have in that object store. So lots of customers have objects that they want to keep in S3 for a period of time, but they want to make easy and automatic and set up triggers to move to Glacier when those objects aren't being used to save money. And so that's why lifecycle management, which is built in automatically to S3 and between S3 and Glacier, helps you do that. Or event triggers, so that you can actually set up, if something comes into S3 and you want to set up some computer processing, you can automatically do that. Or the ability to control where your data goes. For most customers, making sure that that data only lives in one region and doesn't move unless they choose to move it is a big deal. And again, these are 3 capabilities in object storage that nobody else possesses but AWS. Or look in databases. We have a relational database service called RDS, and it comes in 5 different flavors: MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, Postgres, and the new database engine we built ourselves that we announced in November at reInvent called Aurora. Nobody has more than 1. Nobody else has more than 1. And it's really important for customers when they're running databases to be able to fail over in a synchronous way across availability zones so that their application stays up. And then when they're getting a lot of demand and traffic, to be able to use read replicas to handle that scale. Again, features that nobody but AWS offers. Or look in auditing and security and compliance, unbelievably important areas to companies who care about the data that they're storing. On AWS, you have the ability through AWS config to know where all of your resources are and what the configuration is to any of those resources and whether they've changed. You can use CloudTrail, which is our API logging service, to know what's happening with all your API calls and be notified if anything changes. With key management, if you want to hold the keys, you can run them in our cloud HSMs or hardware security modules. Or you can use, if you want to have customer-controlled keys and use our key management service that allows you to do encryption in one click, you can use our key management service. Again, capabilities that nobody else possesses except AWS. So it's not just how many services that we have, it's how many more features within those services that we have than any other technology provider. And it's why it's led folks like Gartner, and this is a quote from Lydia Leong, to say something like, IT organizations cannot treat cloud IaaS providers like commodities. It's because the platforms turn out to be really different in terms of what they provide. And anybody at a company who has any type of reasonable diversity in their workloads will tell you that they're not all cookie cutter. Different workloads need different concentrations of CPU or storage or memory or I/O or GPU in their compute. Or they need different storage options, or they need different relational database options, or different load balancing options, or different routing in their DNS service, or different networking capabilities, or different security and compliance features. They're all different. And if you are going to invest in a technology infrastructure platform, which you have to do to some extent if you're going to move to the cloud in a pervasive way like companies are doing, you want to know that all of your new applications can run on that platform, that all of your existing applications have the functionality to migrate to that platform. You want to know that that platform you're going to use has all the functionality so you don't have to manage applications across a patchwork of different infrastructure platforms that have different functionality. You don't want a circa 2010 cloud platform, and you don't want just a fraction of the functionality that exists. Companies want all of the capabilities of the leader because they want access to the whole enchilada. Now, having a lot of functionality is a big reason why customers are using AWS in such an expansive way, but it's not the whole part of the enchilada. It turns out that customers care a lot about the ecosystem that's around these platforms. You just heard Jason talk about it a little bit earlier as one of the major reasons that Vessel is using AWS. It's not just the very large partner ecosystem of systems integrators and ISVs that have built their businesses around AWS, but it's also how many customers are using the platform, which gives you the opportunity to benefit from all of the collaboration and feedback that we get from our customers. So let me give you an example. You know, AWS has a lot more customers than any of the other technology providers, and what it means is that we're working constantly with large enterprises and government agencies about what they care about. And security is, of course, something that is very, very important. And a lot of the things that we've launched and features and services we've launched have directly come not only from people asking us for it, but from collaboration with those large enterprises and agencies about what they'd want to see in those services. And so what it means for you as customers is that because there's so many customers using AWS, all of that feedback they give helps us build features that will be important and useful for you, and you get those for free just by virtue of being on the same platform with all those other customers. So there's a real network effect when you use AWS. And then also, the last important piece is experience. So we started working on AWS about 11 years ago, and we've been in the market now for over 9. And one of the reasons we started working on AWS was because we had to get really good at Amazon in our retail business the first 10 years, running reliable, scalable infrastructure services deep in the stack, and reliable, scalable, cost-effective data centers. And I can tell you that 9 years later, after being in the market with every imaginable use case and over 1 million active customers, we are much better at this today than we were 9 years ago. There is no compression algorithm for experience. There just isn't. And you can't learn a lot of the lessons that we've learned in this cloud platform business until you get to different levels of, or different elbow levels of the scale. And nobody else has kind of gotten those levels. I'm not talking about running your existing business. That's very different than running a diverse cloud platform with lots of customers who may operate differently from how you operate. And you see that in the maturity of the platforms. You see that with network variability, where AWS has lower network variability than any other provider. Or you see that even in availability. You've probably seen over the last few months some of these providers who've had global, entire world outages for multiple hours. That's just a factor of the maturity of these platforms. They're just not even at this point. Now, one of the hottest startups in the world right now is AdRoll. And they have a very talented team, and they've built something pretty special in a relatively short amount of time. And they've done it using the breadth that I've been talking about that exists on top of AWS. And to talk us through how they're using AWS and what they've built, it's my pleasure to welcome AdRoll's CTO, Valentini Volonghi.
Thank you, Andy, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me here. So I'm Valentino Volonghi, and I'm CTO at AdRoll, and I'm here to talk to you about how AdRoll uses the whole enchilada of products that Amazon Web Services provides us. So let's first start to talk about what AdRoll does. And AdRoll is a marketing platform, and what that means is that we allow businesses of all sizes, big or small, or all experiences, very experienced or instead very, very newbies, to run high-performing marketing initiatives across the world, no matter what their scale is. And we have been very successful at doing this over the years. We've grown to over 20,000 customers over 150 countries. And this is the biggest that any marketing platform has been over the years. Of course, our biggest product and most well-selling product has been retargeting. The concept of it is very simple. Effectively, when a customer leaves your site without buying your products, we enable you to reach these customers with the most appropriate message at the right time when they're browsing a different site or they're using their mobile devices. And this is great because it's intuitive, it works, it performs like search, and customers continue to want to come back for more because they need it to grow their businesses. But of course, the simplicity stops here. The reality is that underneath the surface, this technology, which is called real-time bidding, is actually very, very complicated. And the moment you start operating in it, you immediately realize that you are latency bound. Real-time bidding effectively means that everything we do is intended to be real-time in the strict sense of the word. The platform is operating at over 60 billion impressions per day, and every one of these impressions needs to be responded to within 100 milliseconds or less, no matter where you are in the world. And this is fairly complicated because physics gets in the way in reality. The unfortunate thing is that light in vacuum moves at light in fiber moves at 120,000 miles per second. And with a little bit of math, you'll figure out that a ray of light round-tripping between New York and Paris will take about 60 milliseconds or more to travel between the two. And unfortunately, we only have 100 milliseconds to bid. And this means that the majority of our time will be lost in network latency. And that's just too much. If 1% of the 60 billion requests per day that we receive goes unanswered, that's about 600 million requests that we didn't respond to. That's a lot of errors, a lot of opportunity cost that we just cannot afford to lose on. And this is where Amazon actually helped us the first. When we were a small startup, in order to run RTB, you immediately realize that you need to have global presence from day one. And when you're a startup, you have a choice in front of you. You can either decide to spend all of your hard-earned capital, and you don't have a lot of that lying around when you are a startup, and you can go around the world, in all the places where latency allows you to reach that traffic very quickly and create contracts, data centers, hire engineers, operations, start to call suppliers and get bandwidth contracts, and you can spend all of your time doing this. Or instead, you can do what has allowed us to become successful today and instead spend all of our time and capital in investing on products and innovation. Our engineers did not spend a single minute trying to figure out how to rack all of the machines that we were needing to get to run our business, and instead they spend the time working on our product. But of course, just having instances around the world is not enough. You actually need to have a lot of data in order to run advertising. And data needs to be accessible really, really quickly around the world. And so naturally, when we started our adventure, we had a very simple requirement to a degree. We needed to have a globally scaled database that could answer over 1 million requests per second, and that was not touched by how much data we were storing in it, or how often we were querying it, or the time of day, or whatnot. And so we did our research, and we ended up settling on DynamoDB. And we needed, at the beginning, we didn't need so much from our database, but over the course of time and our growth, we actually started to use this database more and more. And today, we actually are using this system at more than 1 million requests per second. Every one of these requests comes back in 5 milliseconds or less, and we're storing 500 billion objects inside our DynamoDB installation. And we haven't spent a single engineer to operate this system. It's actually technically fun to a degree if that's what you're into, to operate a database at this massive scale. But when you're running a business in which 1% of failures means probably losing $1 million, this is not really the place where you want to play. This is undifferentiated. Our customers don't care. They care that we provide value. But of course, just this data distributed around the world is not going to be enough. What you want to be able to do is that all of your teams need to have the ability to access this data. It's very important to me that the engineers that work at AdRoll have the ability to access the continuously growing data volume that we're generating month after month. In the last month alone, we have generated and stored in S3 more data than we generated in the first 4 months of 2014. And this is compressed data, and the downtick that you see is just because we optimized 3 fields of our log systems to save 20% of log space every single month. But just the volume of data sitting at rest is a bit useless. And the part that makes S3 not so simple but so incredible is that we generate over 10 billion requests per month on our S3 buckets to operate on the data and run our machine learning algorithms so that we can run high-performing campaigns. And of course, when you store that much data in S3, it's not all in a single file. We actually every day upload 17 million, every month we upload 17 million files to S3. And we like to play around not just with established services, but also with new up-and-coming and interesting technologies, and this is where Lambda comes in. As soon as it came out, a couple of our engineers decided to write in about a week a quick prototype of a routing system that would allow our data infrastructure to receive a very timely notification of when any new file were going to be added to S3 so that the teams downstream could get access to the files as soon as they needed to without adding in unnecessary latency to the infrastructure. Today, we can generate all those 300 plus terabytes, 300,000 gigabytes of data in each month and have this data flow through this stream in less than a minute. And this is incredible when you're running a real-time business, of course. So wrapping this up, I want to really mention that I wouldn't be here talking with you guys today if it wasn't for the ability that Amazon Web Services gave us to focus on the product early on in the life of the startup, instead of spending time trying to figure out how to make our infrastructure scale quickly or get contracts all around the world or trying to understand how we could possibly build all of the different pieces of infrastructure that are necessary to run a business like ours that ultimately our customers don't see but that are so fundamental for us to run at scale. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentino. Super cool. Really neat what that company's doing. So we were talking about earlier how much functionality is in the AWS platform. Let me narrow back in on storage. If you think about the storage offerings in AWS today, we have a very large object store in S3. We have a block store in EBS. And we have a backup and archival service in Glacier. And it enables us to run, and our customers to be able to run, a very broad array of workloads on top of AWS, ranging from internet scale web and mobile applications to globally distributed content, backup and archival and disaster recovery, big data analytics, complex and large data sets, and then of course, mission critical databases and business applications. But there's another application workload and storage use pattern which is built on accessing a set of common files directly from a shared file system. And those are workloads like large content repositories or user home directories or development environments, development test environments, and data-intensive applications. And it's hard to run these file systems scalably and reliably. First of all, because file growth often is spiky, it's hard to predict capacity. If you guess wrong too low, you have a bad customer experience. And if you guess too high, you sit on all this wasted capital. The availability and performance of these are hard. You get real hotspots in here as people are using a lot of shared files. And the blast radius of availability problems is really broad because so many applications are sharing and using the same files. You often have very long lead times to be able to get the capacity, as we talked about earlier, which stunts growth. And you constantly have to refresh and update the hardware and the software. It's really hard to manage these. And so what we've found over time, customers use AWS for file systems because it's hard to do internally. But they have to do a lot of work to make a file system work on top of our various building blocks. And what customers have concluded and shared is that a file system is really the missing building block at the core level in the cloud today. And what we've been asked consistently now is, can you help us figure out how to manage file systems in a similar way to how you help us manage objects? And so we listened to that feedback, and it is my pleasure to announce today the Amazon Elastic File System. Which is a managed service to easily set up and share and scale your shared file storage. And so it's a fully managed system to run with EC2. It can manage small applications or really large applications because it scales to a petabyte scale or larger. It's SSD based, so it's going to be fast and have high throughput and low latency. And it's highly available and durable, in significant part too because the service automatically replicates your file system to multiple availability zones, kind of like S3 does, so you don't have to worry about that at all. And then your EC2 instances in that same region, regardless of what availability zone they're in, can access that file system that's been replicated across those AZs in that same region. It's simple. It's really fast to be able to set up and spin up your file system. It is built to integrate with all your existing apps. It supports NFS v4. And the pricing model is simple. There's no upfront costs. There are no commitments. You only pay for the storage that you consume. So it's simple. It's elastic. It allows you to dynamically and automatically resize your file system as you add more files. And similarly, it allows you to shrink when you actually remove files. And it effectively means that you only pay for what you use. So simple and elastic and scalable. Whether you want to use this for an application that's small, dev test, or if you want to use it for something very large that needs very high demands and requirements for scalability, because you can grow elastic file system to a petabyte scale or more, it handles all of those use cases. It not only scales your storage automatically, it also scales your throughput and your IOPS automatically, so you don't have to figure out how much IOPS you need to provision. And then has low latency, consistent support for thousands of concurrent NFS connections. The preview will start in the summer. We're really excited to let you get your hands on it. If you're interested in registering for the preview, please go to the URL there, which is aws.amazon.com/EFS. We're very excited about this. So the fourth pattern that you see in this new normal is that companies will use data more expansively than at any other point in history. And you know, if you think about it, the word big data is a little bit like the word cloud was a few years ago. By the way, IoT is well on its way to this status as well, which is that companies use it to mean lots of different things, typically whatever serves what they're trying to sell you, and it's confusing. The way we think about big data and the way our customers are using the AWS platform for big data is that it's never been easier and less expensive to collect, store, analyze, and share data than it is today with the cloud. And what we see is that in the old days, companies, because it was so expensive and constrained for infrastructure, would have to justify to their manager or their CFO, here are the 2 or 3 questions I want to try and run some computing to answer. Today, because it's so much more cost effective and so much easier to do, they don't have to know the 2 or 3 questions. They can let the data be the star of whatever insights exist. And they don't have to make some of the trade-offs they were making before, where they had to get rid of data after 30 days or 45 days or 60 days. They're able to keep data for much longer periods of time because of the cost structure. And you see one of the big reasons why so many companies are doing large analytics in the cloud is because of the services available. So in AWS, you have multiple sources of truth and data stores between S3 and Glacier and soon to be the Elastic File System. You have multiple high-performance databases so that you can actually react quickly to whatever data you're storing and running queries on. And Amazon DynamoDB, which has really become the de facto database for gaming and applications, as well as Aurora, our new relational database engine that's 5 times faster than the typical MySQL implementation. And you have a number of analysis capabilities between a big Hadoop service and Elastic MapReduce, real-time processing of streaming data in Kinesis, and then a data warehouse in Redshift. And that has enabled a lot of companies to run big data workloads on top of AWS. So let me give you a few examples. If you look at FINRA, they've built their market regulation app that stores and analyzes over 30 billion market events per day on top of AWS. They store those events in S3. They use Elastic MapReduce, our Hadoop service, to run the analysis, and they're saving about $10 to $20 million a year right now using AWS versus doing it on premises. Or look at Bristol Myers Squibb, the healthcare company. They moved their clinical trial simulation platform to AWS, and what they found was that simulations that used to take 60 hours are now taking 72 minutes, and it's also 64% less expensive than what it cost when they were doing it on premises. Or look at Viviki, which is one of the largest marketing and advertising companies in the world right now, and they're using AWS to process large amounts of data quickly so they can adjust campaigns in real time to maximize the ROI on them. And they're running and processing a lot more data on AWS than what they were doing on premises, and yet are still saving 75% on their operating costs. And they've reduced the time to load that analytics data into the system from 20 days to 6 hours. These are all really big differences and very good examples of large companies who are figuring out how much more you can do as it relates to big data and analytics in the cloud. Now, one of the things that we've seen over the last couple of years particularly is that more and more companies have become interested in doing predictive technology and leveraging machine learning. And in fact, we have a number of companies who are doing machine learning on top of the AWS platform. You can see Netflix does it for various recommendations, and we have companies like MetaMind that are doing it, and EA, and they do it today, and they've figured out how to do it, but it's hard work. And then it also requires internally machine learning experts to figure out what to do with the data and how to train the data and how to model it, and et cetera. So it's hard work, but it's doable. And we learned this ourselves in our retail business at Amazon. So from the very, very early days of Amazon's retail business, and you can see that's a very early version of the retail homepage, we were doing machine learning and predictive technology. We used to have this service called Eyes, which would look at artists or authors that you'd bought in the past, and when they had a new title come out, we would proactively email you about it. Or of course, probably many of you have seen the feature that says customers who have bought this also buy this. We call that similarities. We've been using machine learning for a very long time at Amazon, but again, these projects have been heavyweight. They've taken a long time. They typically require people who have expertise in machine learning. And one of the things that we asked ourselves about 2 years ago was, why aren't we doing more projects like this? Similarities has been such a successful feature in our retail business, and we have so many areas in our retail business that really lend themselves well to machine learning. But the problem was, we didn't want to hire hundreds or thousands of machine learning experts to figure it out. And so what we did in our retail business was we built a platform that would enable developers who didn't have any machine learning experience to be able to leverage machine learning and build features around it. And that has been very successful inside the company. And you see it, there's a whole host of examples on that slide, but you see it from things like item classification into the right browse node without having to do each one and figure out what each one is. You see it with products that come into the catalog and looking at serial numbers and trying to decide and predict whether or not you think that they're fraudulent or not. We're using all over our business in the retail business, and it's really had a big impact. And one of the things that somebody on the team did was they ran an experiment. And some of it was to really kind of figure out how long a way they've come in this machine learning platform I'm talking about. And what they did was they took 2 developers, one was a principal engineer and one was really kind of a mid-level engineer, and they let them spend time studying machine learning and figuring out how to train their data and train their model and figure out how to transform the data, et cetera. And they were trying to solve a problem, which was to better predict with accuracy the gender of our customers in our customer base. Because we use the US Census Bureau, but that data doesn't do so well on unisex names like Pat or Jerry. And so the accuracy was more like 65%. So these 2 developers studying machine learning on their own and figuring out how to do this, in about 45 days, improved that accuracy from 65% to 92%. It's pretty good. And then what the team did was they took one developer who had no experience with machine learning and let him use this internal platform that we built to try and solve the same problem. And that developer also got to 92% accuracy, but they did it in 20 minutes. Think about how enabling that is if you can start to do machine learning across your entire development team without having to be a machine learning expert and do it much faster. And so that was really eye-opening to us, and we thought about that, and we figured that you guys might be interested in this service as well. So I'm excited to announce today the launch of the Amazon Machine Learning Service. Which is a fully managed machine learning service for developers even with no experience in machine learning. And to give you more detail about how the service works, it's my pleasure to introduce the one and only Dr. Matt Wood.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Andy. So one of the trends that we've been seeing at AWS over probably the past 18 months to 2 years is that developers are interacting with data of all kinds on almost a daily basis. And they're doing this in a couple of different ways. First thing they're doing is they're looking retrospectively over data that they've collected. So doing analysis and reporting, looking at things and events that have happened in the past using services like Redshift or Elastic MapReduce. The second thing they're doing is they're starting to look at the real-time operations of their infrastructure and what's happening in real time in their applications, in their games, and on their mobile applications by streaming events directly from those applications into Kinesis and processing them on EC2 or Lambda. That's what's happening right now. But there's another area that developers are more and more interested in looking at, and that is looking at predictions of things that haven't happened yet, looking at predictions for events that will happen in the future. And one of the ways that you can do that is you can use machine learning to build predictive models which basically automatically find patterns in existing data and allow you to use those patterns to make confident predictions about new data. So that's what machine learning does. And it allows you to ask questions of data that you probably already have available today on AWS. So based on what you know about a customer, you might want to ask, will they use my product or not? You can segment your customer base to do more targeted marketing, for example. You might want to ask, based on what I know about a particular order, is this order fraudulent or not? And what action do I want to take based on that? Or if you have a collection of articles on your website, you might want to ask, based on what people are looking at, what other articles are they going to find interesting? You can make more relevant recommendations based on that. The challenge of machine learning for developers is that whilst there's some overlap in skills, there's a lot of specialized knowledge required for running machine learning. So you need to be deep on statistics, you need to know how to build models, you need to know how to validate those models, you need to be able to learn about selecting and tuning and optimizing different machine learning algorithms, and you need to know how to work and transform your data so that it's in a good format to build predictive models. That's one set of challenges. Those challenges become compounded when you want to do that in production. You want a highly available system which is running all of these things. And they get even worse when you want to do this at scale. And that's at scale of both ingesting and processing the data that you want to use to build the models, and then at the scale of using those predictions inside your application. And we heard loud and clear from customers that they saw a large opportunity of applying machine learning to the applications and to the data that they already housed on AWS, but they wanted to be able to do that with a lower barrier of entry as possible. They wanted it to be point and click easy so that all of their developers that interact with this data anyway can use machine learning to make predictions going forwards. And so this is really the opportunity of Amazon Machine Learning. It allows customers and developers to easily create machine learning models. It allows you then to very, very quickly and easily visualize and optimize those models using some simple tools that we built right into the AWS Web Management Console. And once you've built and optimized and validated those models, you can put them into production in seconds. It's a simple click. And all of this is using the battle-hardened technology that's been tried and tested inside Amazon.com. So Amazon Machine Learning is very, very easy to use, but it's also high performance. So you can train and optimize predictive models using hundreds of gigabytes of data. And then you can use those models to batch process billions of predictions, or you can put them into a real-time prediction API with a single click. And throughout the whole process, there are no servers to provision, and there's no ongoing management of those servers. It's a fully managed end-to-end service. And it's integrated and comes integrated, ready to work with data that's already stored in S3, Amazon Redshift, and Amazon RDS. So developers can start applying and machine learning and building those predictive models straight away with the wealth of data that they already have available on the AWS platform. So just quickly, I wanted to give you the 3 steps that you need to follow in order to start working with machine learning with the data that you house, for example, in S3. So the first thing you need to be able to do is go ahead and build your model. And it's very easy. You just connect up to the data that's in S3 or in Redshift. And we've built tools which read in the metadata, automatically scan it, and then apply common transitions, and then allow you to take advantage of tools in the console to prepare and explore your data and make it more amenable to building highly accurate predictive models. So this is very easy visualization and very easy to use tooling. Once you've built your model, you can go ahead and validate and optimize that model. So again, we have a collection of interactive tools built directly into the console that allow you to play with and interact with the model that you've created. So you can adjust the predictive accuracy, you can test for false negatives and false positives, and adjust and tune your model without having to go deep on the details of how to go about actually implementing that. It's literally a drag and drop operation. And once you've got a model that you like, you want to go ahead and start working with it, you can make batch predictions asynchronously with a trained model, or you can mount a synchronous, low latency, high throughput API. And you can mount that API for your application with a single click. So that's a very, very brief introduction to Amazon Machine Learning, a fully managed machine learning service for developers. I can't wait to see what you're going to build with it. Now back to Andy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. We are very excited to put this in your hands, and it's available today, as Matt said, Dr. Wood said. So the 5th pattern we see in this new normal is that the old shackles are starting to loosen. This is really good for you guys. Now, as we talked about earlier, in this new normal, companies of all sizes are deploying to the cloud by default for their applications. And you have this very broad, fully featured technology infrastructure platform at your fingertips. However, there have been some areas and some products that have been laggards in making it convenient and easy for customers to use in this new normal. And one of the examples we worked hard on and continue to work hard on, but really started introducing something for you all a couple of years ago, and that was the data warehousing space, where we had lots and lots of customers who were asking us to help provide an alternative because their existing data warehouse solution was expensive, it was hard to manage, and they wanted other alternatives. And that's why we launched Amazon Redshift, which is our data warehouse service, which has at least as strong performance as the commercial grade data warehousing at 1/10 of the cost. And that is the fastest growing service in the history of AWS. And today, we still find ourselves in kind of a similar situation to a couple of years ago that you saw with data warehouses in the relational database space. It's not such a pleasant place for customers. And that's because they tend to be very expensive. They're proprietary. They have high lock-in. And they have punitive and inflexible licensing terms where they're also constantly auditing their customers and fining them if they find anything different. And it's very rare that we meet an enterprise customer who's using one of these commercial-grade databases who isn't looking to shift from what they're using today to something different. And it's why you've seen so many companies move as quickly as they can workloads to these more open database engines like MySQL and Postgres. But trying to get performance on those open engines that's comparable to the commercial-grade databases is hard. It's not impossible. It just takes a lot of tuning and a lot of work. And so what we get asked all the time by our customers and got asked all the time was, is there something you can do that will let us have the same performance characteristics of the commercial-grade databases, but at the openness and cost structure of the open databases. And it's why this past November at reInvent, we launched Amazon Aurora, which is our new database engine for Relational Database Service, or RDS. It's 100% MySQL compatible. It has at least the same availability, durability, and fault tolerance as the commercial-grade databases. Up to 5 times better performance of high-end MySQL implementations, very scalable and very secure, at 1/10 of the cost of the commercial database providers. This has been a big deal. We've been in preview for the last few months. We have thousands of customers who are running in it and very excited about the service and what they're seeing. And so this is something that, again, I think will help you guys continue to have options where you have the performance you want at a cost structure and a licensing model that's more friendly to you. A similar story has taken place with desktops over the last number of years. So in the old world, everybody had these physical desktops, and they were expensive, and they were hard to manage, and they were scattered all over the enterprise, very hard for security or manageability to know who had what and to do patching and updating. And so it's why it led to this advent of virtual desktop solutions, or the VDI space, because it had the promise of this central manageability and security. However, as they got implemented, it turned out that you still had to deploy the software and manage all the software and the patches and the upgrades, and you still had to buy all the infrastructure and hardware and deploy it and manage it. And then the performance has been pretty flaky, and the cost is high. It turns out to be more expensive than even physical desktops. And that was the problem that we were trying to solve when we launched in 2014 Amazon Workspaces, which is our virtual desktop in the cloud, which was to provide all of the benefits that VDI was supposed to provide in having central manageability and security, but also to be able to have no deployment of software, no deployment of hardware, no buying of infrastructure, accessible from any device you could imagine, with much better consistent performance, and it's half the cost of the VDI solution. And that's why Workspaces has become one of the most popular and fastest growing AWS services. In fact, if you look at Johnson & Johnson, they've declared 2015 the year for Workspaces at J&J, where they plan on deploying over 25,000 workspaces in the next year. But it's not just the desktops that have had limitations. Workspaces helped unshackle the desktops. It's the applications that people use on these desktops that have had some of those same types of limitations. Traditionally, you have to buy them over multi-year software licenses. Typically leads to a lot of waste and underutilization. It's very hard to have visibility and to manage everybody in the company and who's doing what and whether you're using your licenses the way you intend to. And it's hard to deploy, and it's hard to update, and it's hard to patch, and it's hard to do all that maintenance that you have to do if you're at a company around desktops. And so we have 2 capabilities that we're going to announce today that are intended to help. The first is the AWS Marketplace for desktop apps. And what that will provide is a marketplace for the popular desktop applications that companies and customers are used to using. You'll be able to provision them easily to run on Workspaces. And then instead of the multi-year licensing model, which has been the norm forever, you pay by the month. It's a very different pricing model than has existed in the past. And you'll see in the marketplace for desktop apps, there are over 100 desktop apps that are available at launch today. And they across 11 different categories that you can see on the slide. And it's not just Microsoft Office. It's some of the other Microsoft apps like Project and Visio and Visual Studio, but also the Kingsoft Office Suite. And you'll see McAfee, and you'll see Adobe, and you'll see TurboCAD, and you'll see WinZip, and you'll see Git and GitHub, and you'll see Eclipse. It's a broad selection of desktop apps that are available to you to start consuming by the month. The second thing that we're announcing today is something called Workspaces Application Manager, or WAM. And what that's intended to do is simplify the problem I was talking about earlier in packaging those apps to deploy to your workspace, to be able to have visibility into how people are using their licenses and what applications they're running. And then also it allows you to automatically do patches and upgrades and updates at scale. Those are big deals. And all the while these desktop applications are running as if they're installed natively on your workspace. So both of these are available today. The first offering, the desktop applications in our marketplace, changes the model for how you can buy desktop applications. And then WAM allows you to have a much easier way to manage visibility to your various desktop apps, to package and to deploy them, and then to do updates and maintenance at scale. So the sixth pattern of the new normal is that reinvention is continuous. It just doesn't stop. And it's not going to stop. And if you look at, for example, the compute space, if you remember what AWS launched EC2 with back in August of 2006, it was with one instance size in one family, the venerable M1 small, for those who remember. And compare that with where we are today, where we have 7 instance families, the newest of which is our new storage optimized family we launched a week ago called D2s. Very, very different world we live in. But it's not just customers wanting to use full instances. Increasingly, more and more developers have wanted to use smaller chunks of compute. And they've really started to gravitate toward these containers that allow them to package all of the components of an application and all of its dependencies into these containers. And what that's allowed them to do is it lets them move much more quickly. So because the components are smaller, it's easier to deploy them, it's easier to update them, it's easier to move them between test and production back and forth, and it also tends to be lower cost because you can fit a lot of these containers in a single instance, which allows you to have less wasted utilization. And it's a big reason why in November at reInvent we launched the preview of our Amazon EC2 container service, which allowed our customers to run fully managed Docker containers in production on top of our EC2 container service. And you can run them across a cluster of EC2 instances, lots of different use cases that customers who are interested in containers have been using in the preview over the last few months. And because we've had so many customers in the preview, thousands of customers, giving us lots of feedback along the way, very excited about the approach we've taken, they have helped us prioritize additional features that we've launched over the last few weeks in our preview. So we launched the ability to use the EC2 container service with our block store, EBS, so you can mount containers to EBS volumes. We also provided the capability to have private Docker repositories, which was really an important feature for our customers of the container service. And it's my pleasure today to announce that we're opening it up to all customers and making it generally available. And what we will provide, apart from general availability, is there's a new management console so that you can use and manage your footprint of containers more easily. We've expanded the geographic reach of the container service, so it's available now in 4 regions: US East in Virginia, US West in Oregon, Europe in Dublin, and Tokyo region, so 4 regions. We've integrated with CloudTrail so that you have auditability into all of the API calls being made to the container service. And then we've also launched, effective today, a brand new scheduler, which is built in for long-running applications. And we're really excited about this because of the capability it provides. It makes it simple to scale containers up and down. It allows you to distribute your traffic across different containers using elastic load balancing, like people who run full instances in EC2 do. Our customers told us over and over again they wanted to use the same functionality that exists with EC2 and the rest of the AWS platform, but just with containers. It allows you to automatically recover unhealthy containers when such a situation exists, and it lets you deploy components to your containers without bringing the application down. It just runs seamlessly. We think that this new scheduler capability makes the EC2 container service the best place in the world to run containers in production at this point. So we're very excited to give you this access today. But the reinvention doesn't stop just at containers, moving from full instances to containers. In November at reInvent, we announced the preview of a new service called Lambda, which is an event-driven computing service, which effectively takes the unit of compute down to a more atomic level and allows you to spin up computing based on the response to application data. And to give you an example of how this works, it really sums it up. I'm really struggling with these slides here. There's an example that I'll give that kind of ties together the benefits of Lambda. So if you think about an application where every time a new photo comes into S3, what the application wants to do is create a thumbnail image of that. In the old days, what you would have to do is provision EC2 instances. You'd set them up in multiple availability zones if you care about the fault tolerance of your application. You'd have to manage those, and then you'd pay for those instances for as long as you had them. Typically, people would keep them indefinitely because they had applications that were doing this resizing all the time. With Lambda, instead, just writing a little bit of code in Node.js, you can set up a trigger in S3, and anytime a new photo comes into S3, it spins up a Lambda cloud function that spins up compute. It automatically spins up the EC2 instances for you. It spreads them across availability zones. It handles all the scaling and managing of that. And in Lambda, we only charge in increments of 100 milliseconds. So a lot of these functions in doing resizing just take 100 or 200 milliseconds. And so you only pay for those increments of 100 milliseconds, and then you don't pay for any time it's down. That is a really different world if you think about it from what's existed and how people have run backends and these types of applications in the past. And so as a result, you see lots of customers who are running Lambda with data triggers like the one I just mentioned. You also can set data triggers for items that enter DynamoDB or streams that enter Kinesis. You see Internet of Things applications and stream processing and all kinds of indexing and synchronization. But one of the things that was super interesting to us over the last few months in our preview is how many mobile developers were using Lambda and what they wanted. And a lot of mobile developers, they want to offload, not surprising, a lot of the computing from the device to AWS. But to be able to do it effectively, given the nature of these mobile apps, they really needed to be able to call Lambda directly. And so we thought about that, and we thought about the feedback we were getting from mobile developers, and we took it to heart. And today, we're announcing two things. First, that Lambda is now generally available and open to everybody. And second, a whole bunch of functionality for mobile developers so they can take advantage of Lambda to the extent that we've seen that they really want to. So now they can call directly from their application. They can call Lambda directly. It's got deep integration with the AWS mobile SDK and also deep integration with our mobile identity and sync service called Amazon Cognito. You can now use our notification service, Amazon SNS, to set a trigger to spin up Lambda functions and to do computing based on what the notification does. And these are all available today. Also, as a quick heads up, we will launch Lambda for Java in the next few weeks. So I'm excited to tell you and to share with you all of these new features and capabilities in Lambda. They're all available today. Java's coming in a few weeks, so look forward to you having at it. So the seventh pattern that we've seen in the new normal is that moving to the cloud is not a binary decision. And I think people have misunderstood this over the years, where they say, okay, I get it. I get why the cloud is so impactful. I get how it can help my business. But are you saying that I either have to move everything to AWS or nothing? And the answer, of course, is no. That's not what we're saying. It's not a binary decision. We know that there are a lot of enterprises who have on-premise data centers that they're not able to retire or not willing to retire for whatever reason at this point. And what they really want is they want a way to manage their on-premises data centers along with AWS in as seamless a way as possible as they're going through this transition over the next number of years. And it's why we've worked so hard on a number of capabilities that allow our customers to run in hybrid IT mode when they need to. So it's why we built Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, or VPC, which effectively is a way for you to provision or quarter off a piece of our network, deploy AWS resources into it, set up subnets. You can make them addressable only through IP addresses that you bring to bear or through the internet if you prefer. And it also connects to your data center topology via VPN, so it really becomes an extension of your data center footprint. It's why we built Direct Connect, which is a private connection between your data center and the AWS regions. It's why we built all kinds of identity capabilities, federated identity, and an Active Directory service so that you can use the identities that you've built over a number of years at your companies in AWS. It's why we've built plugins to things like vCenter and System Center, where we had customers say, look, we use these today to do management. We just want to make it simple to be able to also manage AWS with these tools. So we've built handy plugins there that lots of our customers are using. We've built in our configuration service, which is AWS Config, and our API auditing service, which is AWS CloudTrail, you can now take all the data you get from that and integrate it with your on-premise data through tools like Splunk. We've built a number of deployment capabilities that work not just in AWS, but also on-premise. So people really like the DevOps deployment abstraction we have called OpsWorks. And they also like our new deployment service, Code Deploy. And they said, gosh, I want to use this, but I want to use the same thing across on-premises and the cloud, which is what we've enabled this to do. And then we have a virtual storage appliance so they can move data seamlessly back between on-premise and AWS. Lots of these capabilities that are allowing our customers to run in hybrid mode, and we'll continue to build more in this space moving forward. But it's important to know that we have a little bit different perspective on this than some other old guard providers. I think that a lot of the old guard technology providers believe, or maybe are hoping, that most of the workloads are going to stay on premises. And what most companies want is just a way to run a one-off app in the cloud or to burst to the cloud. And so they've built their hybrid tools to accommodate that older view of the world. We have a very different perspective. We believe over the next 10 years, the vast majority of workloads are moving to the cloud. And if you believe that, then you build the tools a little bit differently. So we've built them so it's easy for our customers to be able to run their on-premise data centers alongside AWS, but also easily be able to move them as they feel comfortable doing so in the coming years. So the last pattern of the new normal I'm going to talk about is that increasingly customers and partners are moving all in on the cloud and AWS. You know, back in 2009, when Netflix decided to do this and the CEO, Reed Hastings, announced he was doing this, people thought that was a very courageous and bold decision, and they were really the first to do it. But if you flash forward now, 5 years, 6 years, it's not as abnormal. You know, on this stage a year ago, the CEO of Infor, Charles Phillips, got up here and uttered what's now become a pretty famous line, which is, friends don't let friends build data centers. which is both clever and true. And you're seeing a plethora of companies now announce that they're moving all into the cloud and AWS. Not just Netflix, but you see Suncorp, the large Australian financial services and insurance company, the Kempinski Hotel Group in Germany, and GPT, the Australian real estate enterprise, and Nippon Express, the very large logistics provider in Japan, and the University of Notre Dame, and MDion, the healthcare technology company. And then at reInvent this past November, you heard Intuit announce that they're moving all of their applications and workloads to AWS. But you also see it on the ISV side and the SaaS side, where they're now in large numbers moving all into AWS and their SaaS applications. And you see that both from born in the cloud SaaS providers like Acquia, but you also see it with Informatica and Infor and Splunk and IMS Health and Pegasystems and Software AG, and then 3 of the new ones that are announcing today that they're moving their SaaS applications all into AWS, and TIBCO and MicroStrategy and Onshape. Another company that is a venerable, very storied brand in the enterprise space is Time Inc. Think about how many publications and how many media entities they have that we consume every day. And they are in the midst of a journey as well to moving all into the cloud and AWS. And to tell you more about this journey, it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage the CTO of Time Inc., Colin Bedell.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon and good evening if you're streaming in. So, there's a nice introduction from Andy. Time's been around since 1923, and I had the pleasure of joining the company about 13 months ago. And if you lightly have a sort of passing familiarity with some of the logos, some of the brands that you see on this screen here, we actually have 80 brands around the world, most of them in North America, in the United States, and of course in the UK. But we also have brands, Time and Fortune especially, that are syndicated worldwide. And we're reaching about 120 million unique impressions through our printed material every month. And we're reaching about 120 million unique visitors through our digital properties. And that digital growth is going up tremendously. So I walked into the doors, or through the doors of Time, as I say, 13 months ago. And this is a picture of the Time Life building in New York at 6th and 50th. And when you come on board as a new CIO, a new CTO, in my case, one of the first things you do is you take inventory. You have a look and you see what you've got, what you're working with, what you need to change, what you want to double down on. And I found, amongst many things, that we have 5 major data centers, some of them owned and operated by ourselves, some of them colo facilities with third parties. I also found that one of those data centers was on the 21st floor of the Time Life building. Actually, I lie. It's not on the 21st floor, it is the 21st floor. And this is some of the most expensive, valuable real estate on the planet, and we're using it for a data center, which in my mind is probably not the brightest move. And there's an interesting story about why that all happened, which I'll be happy to share with you later over a beer. But fundamentally, we've got all of these data centers around the world with a lot of held capital, with the inability to rapidly scale, that we're beholden in many cases to third parties. Getting new hardware on board is incredibly complicated, time-consuming. It's a big challenge, and it's something that clearly I wanted to solve as soon as I walked in through the door. Because, as Andy introduced, I don't want to be in the data center business. I want Time-incorporated staff to really focus on what they do best, which is content, which is video, it's journalism, it's editorial. It's telling those stories and connecting our customers, our readers, our viewers with the world of celebrity, with the world of news, with the world of business. That's what we do best. And anything and everything that is a distraction from that, I want to obviate from the entire system. So I'd actually been at Amazon for 8 years. I left Seattle and I moved to Time. And I was actually involved when I was at Amazon in moving all of the Amazon websites across to AWS. We acted as an internal customer, really an early test of the capabilities of AWS. So we chose AWS very early on for the antithetical reasons that I mentioned before: price, performance, speed to market, capability, and not just getting out of the data center business, but being able to leverage all of the services that AWS has to offer, so we don't have to build them ourselves, or we don't have to bring in from a third party. They're already there, they're pre-integrated, they're easy to use, they're widely distributed. It's just an easy model for us to take advantage of. So the Amazon system was great. The partner ecosystem as well is incredibly important. When I joined the company, we just built a relationship with Acquia because we were shifting our content management system to Drupal, and these are the guys to go and do that. We brought in Alert Logic because one of the issues is AWS is great for physical security, for network security. When you're building an application, you've got to own that security yourself. Amazon doesn't know what you're building. You can build it in any weird and wacky way that you like, but you've got to own the security. And Alert Logic, with a bunch of their firewall capabilities, intrusion detection, have been just an amazing partner. And CloudReach in the UK, we brought in to help us build up subject matter expertise. It's tough to go out and hire cloud expertise, certainly hire AWS expertise. All those folks are in very high demand. You're all in very high demand. So bringing in a third party to help us really develop our SMEs internally and get a fast run at the opportunity was incredibly important. So where we got to is we've now moved 100% of our UK brands across onto AWS. Our hosting costs went down from about $70,000 a month to $17,000 a month. And that's money that I can apply on all of the things that we should be doing as a business. About half of our apps, our customer-facing apps in the US, are now on AWS. We'll finish the rest off by the end of this year. And from our back office, our infrastructural technologies, our corporate applications, we built up effectively an enterprise data center on AWS, and we're moving all of those back office apps. And any that we don't want to move or can't move for whatever reason, great, we're building relationships with third parties for them to deliver product as a service, software as a service, because I want to be out of the data center business completely. It's not our core competency. So we're all in. As Andy said, we've made a big, bold, and I think a very important and transformational decision for our business. By the end of 2015, we'll have got rid of 2 data centers, massively scaled down a third. We'll finish the rest off next year. All of our customer-facing websites and mobile applications will be on AWS by the end of this year, and our corp apps by the end of Q1 next year will be all moved across. And we have a number of legacy mainframe applications that we're going to keep on running. We've got them on Z-series mainframes down in our office in Tampa, in Florida. But we're going to re-engineer those. We're going to use some packaged applications. We're going to do some re-engineering ourselves with the target of moving it to AWS. Well, some of those applications are just fine. We'll just carry on running them. So I'll never be completely out of the data center business, but I'm certainly not building any more, and we're going to scale it down as aggressively as we possibly can. So it's been a fun, interesting, educational, transformational journey for the business. And not just on the technology side. I mean, it's been a big cultural transformation as well. And it's interesting that the more we do on the cloud and on AWS helps us change not just the use of how we're using technology, but also helps us bring in different models of working, DevOps, much more agile development. The speed of development now has really picked up tremendously over the 6, 9, 12 months that I've been at the business, because the staff have just got so much more power at their fingertips to make decisions and to support the business and to support our customers, which is absolutely our primary goal. All right, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Colin. Very, very excited about working with Time. I'm going to close with just some thoughts about change. It's very, very difficult for a lot of companies and a lot of people to deal with fundamental changes in their business, fundamental changes in their industry, fundamental changes in technology. And we've learned this too at Amazon. I'll tell you a little bit of a story about our retail business and one of the changes we had to confront. So back around the year 1999, we had an owned inventory retail business. And when I say owned inventory, what I mean is we bought all the inventory from manufacturers or distributors or labels, stored it and owned the inventory in our fulfillment centers, and then shipped it to customers when they ordered it. And we'd gotten pretty good at it, and the business was pretty large. But what we noticed in 1999 was that there was this huge explosion of websites that aggregated a lot of third-party sellers' selection and allowed people to buy it. And these were things like eBay and half.com and things of that sort back then. And we started to talk about internally whether we should provide that same capability for our customers. And people internally were very anxious about it, in part because we're so customer-focused at Amazon, and we had a really hard time believing, given how much care we showed in our customer service and fulfillment, that thousands of other third-party sellers would show that same care. But we also struggled, in part, frankly, because it was really different from everything we'd done before. We had an entire organization that had built all of its processes and mechanisms and beliefs around this owned inventory retail business, and we weren't sure how the manufacturers and the publishers would feel about us buying product from them and then putting on a detail page right alongside the same product from hundreds or thousands of third-party sellers. And so we had a lot of animated conversation about this over several weeks. And we ultimately decided to pursue offering third-party sellers on our retail site. And we did it for two reasons. The first reason was that it was better for customers. It turns out that if you have third-party sellers, there's more selection, and there's better variety in pricing, which often means lower prices. But at least as importantly, the second reason we chose to do it is that it's really hard to fight gravity. And if something is going to happen because it's a better value proposition for customers, no matter how much you don't want it to happen, no matter how much you wish it away, no matter how much you jump up and down, it is going to happen. And so we made that decision to offer third-party sellers items, and that turned out to be a very good decision for the company because, of course, customers wanted that selection and that variety, and it contributed 43% of the total units we sold in our retail business Q4 of 2014. Well, I think we're at a very similar point in technology today with cloud computing. Cloud computing is the biggest technology shift in our lifetime. And there are a lot of companies that are nervous about it, particularly the old guard technology companies, because it's so disruptive to their existing businesses. But there are also some people at companies that are nervous about it because it's really different from what they've done in the past, what they've known, and how they've operated. But it's really hard to fight gravity. And if something is so compelling to customers that they are voting with their workloads in an accelerating way every month, usually you're better served trying to figure out how to embrace that and think through how to leverage it in your own business. The cloud is providing all of us and companies with an unbelievable opportunity to completely reinvent their businesses, add new customer experiences, and do so much faster than ever before. Use your energy to figure out how to take advantage of that. And we'll be right here to help you however we can. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoy the summit today.